Breaking news, you're looking at video of one of the last times Oscar winner details this hour about the circumstances surrounding his death. His front door open, scattered pills on the bathroom countertop, one dog dead in the closet.
The news of Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa passing away at their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, has left the world in shock. Gene Hackman, a Hollywood legend with iconic roles, cherished by the masses, suffered soul-crushing abandonment by those he loved most in ways none could even imagine. His father, an angry man, left the family without explanation. His mother died before she was able to see her son become successful on the silver screen. His best friend, Norman Gary, died of despair and committed suicide. And there are numerous other tragic stories that are still largely untold, but Hackman never allowed the pain to conquer him. He lived with strength, passion, and an unwavering determination to battle on no matter what his age. His story is one not of the loss of a star, but the final chapter of a life that was full of trials, resilience, and an indomitable spirit. Are you prepared to hear the story of a man who was abandoned but discovered the power to fight on a Hollywood legend, a commanding figure on screen? But Gene Hackman passed away in silence, leaving an unsolved tragedy. His and wife Betsy Arakawa's death at their residence in Santa Fe, New Mexico, had not only left the public shocked, but had also raised a chain of puzzling questions. On that fateful day, a worried neighbor had called the police after observing strange circumstances that the couple had not been around for a prolonged time when the police arrived. They found Hackman and Betsy dead in separate rooms. One of their 3 dogs was also dead, while the other 2 were alive. The incident left shivers down the spines of many, since everyone had not anticipated a apparently peaceful existence to be cut short in such spooky isolation. What really disturbed the public was the behavior of one of Gene's 3 children, Leslie Ann Hackman. 58 informed the media that the family was yet to await official reports on the cause of death, since the couple's death was still a mystery. Leslie and her sister, Elizabeth Gene Hackman Speck, elated that their stepmother and father could have died of carbon monoxide poisoning due to a possible gas leak during the theory seemed credible. Investigators could not find any trace of such a leak instead. According to the official report, Gene Hackman and his wife had probably died days before, as their bodies exhibited signs of decomposition. Leslie also added that there had been no sign of any health problems with her father before his death. Although he was old, he was in excellent condition. She disclosed, asserting that he had not had any serious surgeries. Within the last few months, he loved Pilates and yoga, and he still exercised a number of times a week, so he was in good condition. What was more astonishing was that while the world was still reeling from the death of the legendary Gene Hackman and his wife Leslie, confessed that she wasn't too amazed because her dad was already 95 years old, residing in California. She had neither seen nor heard from her father, who had a secluded existence for months. We were quite close. I hadn't talked to them in a few months, but all was normal and fine. She told as of now, Leslie has not traveled to New Mexico and told that she would not do it until the police finished their investigation. On February 27th, Leslie and her sister were seen having dinner together at a Burbank, California Denny's restaurant, looking calm and smiling. Based on the Daily Mail, the photos were taken almost a day after they heard of their father and stepmother's death. While the investigation may take months, one can expect a loving daughter to fly immediately out, examine the scene, and make funeral arrangements. Instead, she made a different decision. Hackman's grandson. Tim Hackman also broke his silence. He disclosed that Leslie was the only family member who was in touch with Gene Hackman, but even so, they only made contact every few months. Tim revealed the last time he had seen Gene Hackman was 11 years ago, when his father's funeral took place. It turns out that during his last years, Gene Hackman had decided, or had been fated, to spend a life of solitude that was separated from his family and closest bonds. The outstanding question now is, was this solitude his choice, Or was it imposed on him by Fate Leslie, sold the exclusive story to the Daily Mail, a tabloid which pays sources to tap? Sensational news. This has made the public wonder, was she really mourning her father's death, or was she profiting from the tragedy for attention? Would a truly heartbroken daughter consider selling her story, just as word of her father's death was coming through? Hackman was no ordinary man. He was born in 1845, poverty-lived with an unbreakable spirit, and never let himself get beaten. Yet in a harsh twist of fate at the end of his journey, he died in silence, with no loved ones around him. After he left Hollywood in 2004, Hackman opted for a simple life in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He and Betsy lived simply far away from the clamor of the entertainment world. No more extravagant parties, no more flashing cameras, just an old man looking for a sliver of peace in his later years. But maybe it wasn't the type of peace he had wished for. He was seen for the last time in 2023, having dinner with Betsy at a nearby restaurant. The pictures took an old man frail, but still bearing the presence of a battle-scarred warrior. There were no images of children clustered around his bedside, no tears of grief from his family, only a man who had once been strong, but when he took his last breath, no one was present to see it. The individuals in his life who meant the most, some left him, while others he drove away. The death of Gene Hackman was not merely the demise of a Hollywood legend, it was the final testament to the deepest loneliness of a man who had lost too much in life. At the end, was it destiny that picked him, or did he pick this destiny for himself? Gene Hackman spent his childhood in a chaotic home life of no stability and warmth. Eugene Ezra Hackman was an employee in the newspaper printing business, but his unreliable job required the family to live in constant shifts. The communication between Hackman and his father strained, since his father was a hard man, with a tendency of using excessive violence as a means of disciplining his children. This made living in the family home all suffocating an environment that urged young Hackman, a rebellious but also sensitive boy, to use the basement as shelter, where he created a private room to feel comfortable. When Hackman was 13 years old, a life-changing incident ruined his world. His father suddenly left the family without explanation. One morning when Hackman was playing outside with friends, at the end of the block, he saw his father drive past and wave. That was the last Hackman ever saw of him, and that experience tormented him for the remainder of his life in a 2001 episode of Inside the Actor's Studio. When James Lipton questioned him about that memory, Hackman was unable to conceal his feelings, confessing it was a painful recollection he shared. "I was at the end of the street playing with some guys, and he drove by and waved when Lipton asked if maybe he had seen his father again. After that, Hackman merely nodded in silence, suppressing tears. The man who had taught him discipline and violence, who despite his toughness, was still his sole support pillar, now vanished. Hackman and brother were forced to live with their mother in their grandmother's residence in Danville, Illinois. But rather than receiving warmth from family, Hackman encountered cold indifference and emotional deprivation at the hands of his grandmother, who never really accepted him. Such experiences molded Gene Hackman into a resilient and strong-willed individual, but also seeded rebellion and a lifelong feeling of abandonment. But this was only the starting in the coming years. Hackman would keep on fighting adversity, and sometimes he himself would be the one producing the very storms that rocked his life. Hackman was tormented by the reality that his mother was the only member of his family who had faith in him and motivated him to become an actor. She could see his talent and assured him that he could be an eminent performer, but that love was not sufficient to wipe out the emotional distance and coldness in their family, particularly as his mother had a problem with alcohol and the struggles of life at the time. In 1962, disaster hit. Hackman's mother died in a horrific house fire. The fire was caused after she dozed off with a burning cigarette in her hand while drunk in no time engulfing the house in flames for Hackman. It was not only the death of his mother, it was the agonizing grief of realizing that she would never see the success he had struggled so hard to get. The one person who had believed in him was dead, unable to see her son become a star and reach the heights she had hoped for him. Though Hackman seldom spoke in public about this tragedy, he once confessed, in an interview, that if he had a choice, one film for his mother to see it would be I Never Sang for My Father. The film reflected his own life, a tale of loss in it. Hackman played Gene Garrison, a son torn apart by a complicated relationship with his aging father. Desperately seeking love and understanding, it was not just a representation of Hackman's actual life conflict with his father, but also a confrontation with the feelings he had borne with him all his life, similar to Hackman's own life. The film was an odyssey of discovering emotional deprivation, a yearning for love and acceptance, things he had been deprived of throughout his childhood. Through the movie, Hackman conveyed the deep sadness of unresolved hurt and an unfulfilled yearning for love, something that was never simple to achieve. To gain a better insight into the concealed depths of Gene Hackman's stormy life, you can see I Never Sang for My Father on streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, or rental services like Google Play Movies and Apple TV. The agony of losing his mother and the cold callousness of his grandmother implied in Hackman a profound feeling of loneliness and yearning for love that never happened. But life did not permit him to bask only on those wounds. In the subsequent years, Hackman was subjected to another crushing loss. The abrupt death of his closest friend, Norman Gary Hackman, had taken comfort in this friendship because Gary was a person whom he could trust in bad times. But when Gary decided to take his own life in 1982, Hackman lost not only a close friend, but was also faced with an agonizing reality time. And again, the individuals he cared for most all left him. Norman Gary was not only a close friend, he was also a well-known entertainment lawyer, highly regarded in the movie industry. He had played a key role in managing Hackman's legal matters and contract negotiations, someone the actor trusted blindly, famous for his commitment and skill to handle intricate situations. Gary appeared to have it all, though below the surface of his professional achievement, he experienced financial difficulties that were never properly accounted for. His untimely death left Hackman not just bereaved, but also tormented by nagging questions. Forever wondering whether there was anything he might have done to avert the disaster, Gary's death was more than a sad loss. It created a void in Hackman's existence. It also bred rumor and mystery about the financial issues that were never made visible, compelling Hackman to exist with unanswered questions. For a man who had already suffered so much loss since childhood, seeing loved ones disappear one by one caused him to slowly shut his heart, looking for meaning in his profession instead of personal relationships. But not all loss results in defeat. Hackman, with a survival instinct shaped from a lifetime of adversity, decided to confront his pain by immersing himself in his work. He poured all his energy into acting, accepting role after role, not to flee from his feelings, but to prevent himself from being overwhelmed by solitude. And it was within these relentless years of work that Hackman turned his sorrow into motivation, giving some of the strongest performances of his career. His unflinching, enduring commitment sealed his position in Hollywood, gaining him 2 Oscar nominations and affirming his unquestionable talent and screen presence after the emotional shock of losing his closest friend to suicide. One would believe fate would finally grant him relief, but it did not. The whirlwind of marital discord soon followed. Hackman threw himself into work, shooting day and night, jumping from one set to another, moving from city to city. His wife, Faye, and the children slowly became remote figures in his life. The calls home grew less regular, and his attendance at family dinners became a rarity. In a 1989 interview with the New York Times, Hackman conceded, "You become horribly selfish as an actor. You spend your whole life wanting to be noticed. And when success arrives finally, it is difficult to refuse money, fame, temptation. It's more than a poor kid like me can stand. Exist. Fay Maltz had waited patiently, but eventually the gap between them had grown into a bridge too wide to cross. In 1986, after 30 years of marriage, they formally divorced. Hackman's first marriage ended quietly. No battles, no disputes, just the lingering regret of a man who realized, too late, what he had lost. In an interview with GQ, when asked about any advice he would give his son, bitterly admitted, "I was away from him for too long. I have no advice to give." Was it fate that decided this ending? Or was it a choice he made himself? Either way, the cost of exchanging family for success was too great, and he realized that too late with bitterness and sorrow. And although this might not have been a course he deliberately followed, somehow fate always seemed to conspire to drive him into a world of solitude. One where ultimately he was really alone. Gene Hackman was more than a Hollywood legend. He was a man who lived with an intensity that reached far beyond the silver screen. One of his largest hobbies, aside from acting, was speed racing. Wasn't only a hobby for him, it was a means of finding balance in the high-stress world of fame. His passion for racing started in the late 1970s, when Hackman became a member of the Sports Car Club of America, a highly competitive circuit for both amateur and professional racers who have a passion for speed. But Hackman didn't limit himself to amateur racing. He challenged himself into bigger events. One of his most iconic milestones was racing in the notoriously tough 24 Hours of Daytona in 1983 there. He didn't only race, he got behind the wheel of a Toyota for the legendary driver Dan Gurn's team, a privilege few could enjoy. He even went on to win the Long Beach Grand Prix Celebrity Race, showing that he wasn't there for the experience, he was there to win. But with victory came peril. Hackman experienced his share of hair-raising experiences on the racetrack while racing in the 6-hour endurance contest at Sears Point Raceway. He was driving an Audi Quattro, one of the most sophisticated racing vehicles available at the time. Tragedy struck when the brakes locked up and the vehicle careened out of control mid-race. Lucky for him. Hackman walked away unharmed, but the accident was a hard reminder that speed has its price, always true to his quick wit. He later teased that he might have needed a stunt double. For that scene, his passion for vehicles was not limited to the RAC circuit. Hackman's personal collection evidenced both his formidable personality and his changing tastes. Through the decades in the 1980s and 1990s, he had a Toyota Celica GT, the same car he drove in competitions. As the years passed, his collection came to feature some of the most thrilling and glamorous vehicles on the market. Porsche Panamera, a combination, power and luxury. Mercedes E-Class, a comfort and class balance. Ford Shelby Mustang, an American icon of speed and performance. And Tesla Model S, a nod to his love of new technology and the future of cars. His collection was not merely a display of wealth, it was a declaration of passion. Each car had a story to tell, representing a different chapter in his life. But as with most great passions, Hackman eventually had to leave racing for the good of his health. He honestly acknowledged that age had taken its toll on his reflexes. And for a sport which required instant reactions, there was no room for flexibility. You have to have quick reflexes. And when they begin to fail, you must call it quits. Hackman once asserted, you start considering old age, and you know that you have to look after yourself more. It was a difficult choice, but it underlined his pragmatism. He was a man who recognized his boundaries and accepted them with dignity. Through his passion for racing, Gene Hackman demonstrated he was more than an actor, but a fearless competitor, a person who welcomed speed and challenge with the same passion he had for his movies. Racing wasn't merely a hobby, it was a means by which he could demonstrate his resilience, both on the track and in life. But even in his older age, Hackman still surprised individuals with his lifestyle preferences. While most Hollywood actors spent their time acquiring unusual and extravagant supercars, Hackman stuck to one car, a Toyota Tundra, not a supercar with all the flash, not a collector's piece rarity, but a useful, powerful, and dependable truck. It was an appropriate choice for a man who had lived life on his own terms, unpretentious strong, and never one to bow to expectations. A glimpse of him at a gas station in Santa Fe, emerging from his tundra, surprised many with the fact that it didn't surprise him so much for a truck of such humble status that seemed to drive for a Hollywood star of such renown. But Hackman, it was just that which mattered for him, a carriage that took him wherever he had to go, a car with sufficient strength to cope with whatever terrain presented itself. Yet, not one of such luxury to seek publicity. It was as if Hackman had grasped an underlying principle that the essence of life isn't in high possessions, but in peace and happiness. The tundra was not just a means of transportation. It was a sign of the lifestyle he had adopted after walking away from the glare, a life uncluttered by the demands of noise free from the burdens of grandeur, but still abounding, filled with quiet force and unshakable determination. Much like the man, Gene Hackman never lost his challenge. Even after the stage lights faded, he walked into the arena of literature with the same dedication and ingenuity that had propelled his acting career throughout almost 2 decades. Hackman wrote 5 novels, each reflected his profound insight into history and human nature, from the swashbuckling adventure of Wake of the Pedo Star to the suspenseful story of revenge and love in Payback. At Morning Peak, he demonstrated his skill in writing vivid characters and vivid settings, particularly Pursuit of Crime. Thriller bore echoes of his legendary role in The French Connection, designating a signature style which connected newer generations of readers to the legendary artist. Making a transition from the screen to the page wasn't merely a change in medium. It was Hackman's method of keeping his artistic passion alive. He didn't write to relay stories, he wrote to mirror himself. A man who had seen adversity recognized perseverance and had experienced the yearning to be recognized. In a rare interview, Hackman once divulged that writing enabled him to preserve artistic license to dictate his own narratives outside of the regime of Hollywood's norms. And through all pages, he continued to uplift, demonstrating genuine artistry. Never really leaves, Hackman also spent some time painting something he never spoke about with him. Painting was something that released something, a method of keeping a balance in life. I do not want people to view my paintings. Once he said to Hackman, revealing his intentions to keep his private area to Hackman. Painting needed no admiration, no notice. It was just a time when he could be completely himself, free from the din of the world and the pressures of being a Hollywood star. In this way, he discovered a rare feeling of serenity in a life that had always been lit up under the spotlight. Hackman's love of sports was equally unusual among other sporting ambitions. He loved football deeply, a staunch supporter of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He regularly went to games to root for his team. For Hackman, football wasn't about entertainment. It was about how to engage the community and get involved in the energy that the sport created. Although Hackman is no longer here, fans will never forget him as the face of a true tough guy. One of the most memorable instances that demonstrated his toughness came in 2001 when he was involved in a street fight in Hollywood while driving. Hackman unintentionally crashed into another vehicle. 2 young men emerged clearly angry, but instead of keeping their cool, they started throwing insults at Hackman, unaware that they were dealing with a former Marine. At 71 years old, Hackman was not a man to be pushed around without a lot of verbal exchange. He threw a punch in reaction. The 3 men fought in the middle of a busy street before the police came and dispersed the crowd. No arrests were made, but the incident served as another testament to the fact that even after abandoning action, films behind Hackman never lost his fighter instinct in real life. But perhaps Hackman's closest brush with death occurred in 2012 when riding his bicycle in Florida without a helmet, he was struck out of the blue by a truck. News of the accident circulated quickly, and fans feared the worst, many worrying he might be seriously injured or, worst still, against all odds. Hackman managed to survive. He suffered only minor injuries and was discharged from the hospital the same day. Those close to him revealed that despite his age, he never gave up his cycling routine, though. After the accident, he became more cautious, never again riding without a helmet. That same year, another event proved just how fiercely protective Hackman was of those he loved. While walking with his wife Betsy in Santa Fe, he physically confronted a homeless man who had verbally harassed her. Reports stated that Hackman punched the man in defense of his wife, but the altercation resulted in no charges, again proving his strong sense of family loyalty. Later that year, at the age of 82, Hackman was involved in an accident for the second time when he was hit by a car while cycling in the Florida Keys. Although emergency personnel rushed him to the hospital, he recovered quickly and suffered no permanent injuries. Another testament to his amazing toughness and resilience. Recalling his younger years, Hackman's tough exterior was apparent right from the beginning at only 16. He falsified his age in order to join the United States Marine Corps. Fidgety and desperate to get away from an unstable domestic environment, he saw military service as an escape. But the strict atmosphere of the Marines proved too much for one. As restless as Hackman, he constantly disagreed with superiors, often ending up in disciplinary trouble for refusing to yield to rigid regulations. All the same, his occupation as a radio technician provided him unforgettable experiences. He worked in different regions of the world, even venturing into China during the Ma Dong period, exposing him to unfamiliar landscapes and cultures, which enlarged his worldview. But it was not all adventure in one dangerous event. He had a nasty motorcycle accident when he bumped into a tractor. The accident left Hackman with several broken bones, and he survived by mere chance. After departing the Marines, Hackman came to understand that being in the military was not for him, however. Those years defined his perception of himself and became a vital part of his rocky journey. His life was beset by difficulty, close calls, and a constant struggle, both literal and internal. But despite all of it, Hackman never bowed to adversity. Throughout the numerous turmoil of life, Gene Hackman was more than a good actor. He was the MENT of resiliency and the unbreakable will to rise above adversity in spite of suffering, horrific loss, and losing loved ones one by one. He never let such hardships break him, but rather they served as fuel for his resolve, driving him ahead toward establishing his place in the art world. The February 26, 2025, death of Hackman and wife Betsy Arakawa did not only leave fans devastated, but also left a nagging question. How could a person be so robust, so full of life leave? In such silence, but the legacy he leaves behind, his legendary performances. His deeply expressive writings will live on. He turned every pain into a story worth remembering, every setback into a step forward, ensuring that today we remember him as a legend who never backed down. Share your thoughts on Gene Hackman's amazing life in the comments below. If you like stories like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to keep joining us on this journey. Click on the video on your screen to learn more about Gene Hackman's amazing story.